Hello everyone and welcome to the Healthy You Feel Good Festival with Fresh. I'm so excited to be with you today alongside so many other wonderful health and fitness professionals from the local area so that we can help you live healthy and happy. I'm Sarah Law and I'm a qualified nutritional therapist who has a huge passion for helping people really understand how their bodies work and providing people with the tools to make living in a healthy, happy body something that can be fun and enjoyable, not full of deprivation and lack. So I really believe in the philosophy, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you give a man a rod, you feed him for life. So if I can teach you how miraculous your body is, then I wholeheartedly know you'll be more likely to make lasting changes, because when you really understand the impact food has on your overall health, it really makes you develop a very different relationship with food. And you're more mindful about what you put into your mouth on a daily basis. So it's important to know that living in a healthy body doesn't mean deprivation, counting calories, or giving up tasty food. And in fact, I am the queen of helping people make treats, snacks, desserts, anything out of healthy ingredients that can replace the foods that might be making you feel sluggish, tired, bloated, a bit foggy in the brain, and all the other things that have become our norm that really shouldn't be our norm. Now, I want to talk to you all about your gut because it is the hub of everything. And the father of all medicine, Hippocrates, said all disease begins in the gut, and how right he was. So the health of your gut affects the health of your entire body. If you're having skin issues, problems managing your weight, low moods, erratic mood swings, foggy brain and forgetfulness, your hormones are out of balance, you've got energy dips and crazy cravings, did you know they can all be influenced by the health of your gut? Well, if you didn't know, you do now. So one thing we're not taught to think is, do you know what, I'm feeling a bit anxious today. Oh, I've got this really niggly headache that's been there a while. What's going on in my gut? But that is exactly how we should be thinking. We often think, oh, I don't have a bloated belly or I don't have stomach pains, my gut's absolutely fine. But gut health affects every area of the body. And just because you don't have bloating, gas, or stomach pains, it doesn't mean that your gut health is amazing. If you have other issues going on in the body, it may well and probably has started in your gut. So there are two parts of the gut. Think of your gut like a garden. In a beautiful garden, we want to have loads of different species of beautiful flowers, and we don't want loads of weeds. Obviously, a few little weeds here and there around the edge, they're fine, we can deal with it. But if those weeds start to come in and take over the garden and, stop all those beautiful diverse flowers from growing, that's when we have an issue with the garden. And our gut is exactly the same. So the gut is home to over 100 trillion bacteria. The human gut contains 10 times more bacteria than all of the human cells in our entire body. And there's over 400 known diverse bacterial species. So they're your beautiful flowers. These gut bacteria are your beautiful flowers in your garden, all these different diverse ones. So it's a little bit creepy to think about. We actually have more bacteria than we have human cells. And we call this the gut flora. So the gut flora promotes normal gastrointestinal function. It really helps all of this work properly so we can absorb nutrients. So it's not only important for the necessary digestion of your food and absorption of those nutrients, these bacteria also help your body to produce vitamins. So they actually produce vitamins for you, which is pretty cool. They help you absorb minerals. They aid in the elimination of toxins out of your body, which is so important. And they're responsible for a good part of your immune system. And in fact, our gut flora, those beautiful diverse flowers in our gut, in our bellies, control about 80% of our immune system. Plus, some aspects of mental health, including your ability to resist anxiety and stress, are all influenced by your gut flora. Now, every single cell of our body is made from the nutrients in the food that we eat. So if we aren't putting good nutrients in the first place, then of course our cells are not going to work efficiently. But also, if our gut is not functioning well, then we're not going to absorb the nutrients from the food that we are eating properly to make our cells function efficiently. So it's really important to think about putting the right stuff in and supporting our gut to make sure it's absorbing the good stuff. So we have a really long nerve called the vagus nerve, which runs from the gut to the brain, and signals are sent up and down this nerve all day, every day. So they communicate. How cool is that? Our brain and our gut speak to each other. And this is why our gut is also normally called the second brain. So if there's something going on in your gut, it will send signals to your brain giving feedback. And also, did you know that a huge proportion of your happy hormones are actually made in your gut? So you truly can eat your way happy. So if we eat well and have a happy gut, our mind and thoughts can be affected really positively. So we can also absorb nutrients better that impact our focus and our brain health, because we need fuel for our brains to function well. Did you know also that your gut bacteria regulate your metabolism, which is how you burn food for fuel? Certain bacteria in your gut influence how you use your food, whether you store it as fat or you use it as fuel. So this is why I was talking about the metabolism earlier. So the reality is, if you want a robust immune system, look after your gut. If you're struggling with your weight, look at your gut, and know that even your hormones are affected by your gut. So that affects how your body works too. So going back to that garden analogy, we want lots of those diverse, beautiful flowers and not loads of weeds. Now, like I mentioned, some of those weeds just sitting around the edge, they live there kind of quite happily, not really causing a huge amount of issues. But if they start to overrun, this is when our garden just looks awful. And that's the same with our guts. If we have a few of those little bacteria that, just kind of live there on their own, not really doing much, they're just there at the side, they're fine. But it's when they start to overgrow that we see issues. And this is what happens in modern day living with the way that we eat. So you might be thinking, well, what affects my beautiful garden? So the things that affect your garden, your gut flora, are medication. So antibiotic use is a huge one. Now, of course, antibiotics in some circumstances are absolutely vital. But what they do is they basically wipe out all of the bacteria in our bodies, including in our guts. So studies have actually shown that antibiotic use causes a really profound and rapid loss of diversity in that gut flora. So those beautiful flowers have basically just been wiped out. So this diversity is not recovered after antibiotic use without intervention. So adding back in good bacteria through probiotic supplements and feeding them with prebiotic foods and prebiotic supplements. Also, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, which we can buy over the counter, massively impact our gut flora. So it's really important to start thinking about how often are you taking pain medication, and is there a better alternative if necessary. The second thing that can affect our gut flora is obviously our diet. Diets that are really high in refined carbohydrates and really heavily processed foods massively impact our gut flora. So packaged and really processed foods. And this is something I'm going to talk a little bit more about when I give you some tips at the end. Artificial sweeteners, if they're overconsumed, can really impact our gut flora. And again, what's happened in the world is people have gone, right, okay, well, let's get rid of sugar, let's get rid of this, let's get rid of that. So we put artificial versions in instead. So we have all these artificial sweeteners in so much of our food, which is really causing this shift in our gut flora. And then foods that lack beneficial fiber again. So when we eat lots of refined foods, processed foods, packaged foods, they're all really low in fiber. Whereas when we're eating real food, it's naturally high in fiber. And that fiber feeds our good gut bacteria and helps it repopulate and helps it grow and thrive. Another thing is chronic stress. Now, obviously, we live in a world where stress is just part of it nowadays, but it's about learning how we deal with that stress, which is really, really important. And then finally, wheat, industrial and seed oils that have been really heavily processed, so like vegetable oils. And I'm going to talk a lot more about vegetable oils in my tips about why you should replace them actually with better quality oils. And also foods that can damage the gut lining, like gluten and wheat, are big ones that can really shift our gut flora. Another interesting fact for you all, did you know that your gut bacteria may also be influencing your cravings and your food choices right now? So before you go and beat yourself up about having lack of willpower and no discipline when you go onto yet another diet, question whether you actually have a healthy gut, because your gut bacteria want to be fed. They want to survive. So these kind of unhealthy weeds that are sitting around, they normally thrive on heavily processed foods, refined carbohydrates. They're the things they feed on. So they're like, right, I'm going to make you eat those so I can survive, repopulate, and run rampant in your gut. Not ideal. So the second thing I just wanted to talk briefly about is your gut lining. So you've got your gut flora, which is all these lovely bacteria in your gut, the good ones and some of the weeds that we want to kind of avoid as much as possible. And then you have your gut lining. So the gut is actually a hollow tube that passes from your mouth right down to your butt. And anything that goes in the mouth and isn't digested will pass right out the other end. And this is actually, in fact, one of the most important functions of the gut. It's to prevent outside foreign substances that shouldn't be in the body entering the body. So the gut lining is like this gatekeeper. It determines what gets in and what stays out. And that's so important. We don't want things in our bodies that shouldn't be in our bodies. So we want to be able to absorb the vitamins and minerals from our food into our body through the gut lining, but not things that should be eliminated and going out, essentially. So like I mentioned earlier, every single cell in your body needs certain nutrients to function. So I like to think of your gut lining a bit like a bin bag. This is another analogy for you. So you've got your gardens and you've got your bin bags. So with a bin bag, if you put the right things in, you tie it up and you put it out, it's fine. But if you put things in that aren't meant to go in a bin bag, they puncture the side and then all the bin juice comes out. It's not nice at all, is it? And this is kind of like our gut lining. So that gut lining is your bin bag, and we want it to absorb the good things through, although we don't want that with a real bin bag, but with our gut linings we do. We want to absorb those nutrients through. But what can happen is large protein molecules can escape into the bloodstream if we've got issues with our gut lining. And since these proteins don't belong outside of the gut, the body mounts this massive immune response against them and starts to attack them. And this is why there's such a big link between gut health and autoimmune conditions. So if you have an autoimmune condition right now, I would highly recommend looking at your gut, because I imagine you probably have a slight issue with your gut lining and what we call a leaky gut, which means holes in your bin bag that things can escape through. So when these protein molecules escape through the gut lining, they can cause inflammation and widespread issues in so many other parts of the body. And inflammation is the basis of all disease. So they can cause issues with the skeletal system, the pancreas, the kidneys, the liver, the skin, and the brain. So this is why you might not necessarily have gut-related symptoms, but you might have things going on with your skin or your brain or your memory or your moods, all of those other things, or your joints, because they're all impacted by this inflammation process that is happening when those undigested proteins are escaping through your bin bag into your body where they shouldn't be. So what can cause issues with that bin bag, with the gut lining? All the things that I mentioned earlier that cause issues with the gut flora can do exactly the same thing with your gut lining. Foods that the body doesn't deal with very well. So it's a bit like I mentioned, the bin bag. If you put something in there that's not supposed to be in there, let's say you put some glass in there, it's going to poke through. So if you're putting things in on a consistent basis that your body doesn't deal with very well, and the main culprits are gluten, and dairy is a big one for a lot of people because they lose the ability to digest dairy properly. We kind of lose the digestive enzymes, a lot of us, to digest dairy properly. So when you start putting things in that your body doesn't deal with very well, it starts to cause this permeability in your gut lining. It kind of pulls the cells of your gut lining apart, especially gluten, and that can allow undigested proteins to escape through into the bloodstream. And when that happens, that's when this immune response happens, and that's where we kind of lead to multiple food intolerances, when we have all this inflammation and all these kind of inflammatory things going on, and this immune response going on, because the body's just gone, mayday, mayday, I'm going to start attacking everything now. So hopefully you now see how your gut needs some love and why it needs some love. So of course I want to give you some practical advice to help you know what to do to really support your home for life, which is your body. So this is the practical bit. So number one, start your day properly. I want you to think of your breakfast. What did you have today? What was it? And this can either set you up for success or it can set you up for failure. So what I highly recommend with your breakfast is make sure that you include lots of good healthy proteins, which will keep you feeling really full and satiated, and good healthy fats in there. And I'm going to talk you through some ideas in 1 second, as well as some complex carbohydrates and some fiber. So this is a bit like putting logs on a fire. If you put paper on a fire, what happens? It burns really quickly and you have to keep putting more paper on and more paper on and more paper on. That's the same as putting just like refined foods into our body. So if you look at most people's breakfasts, a lot of people start with either some fruit and some juice, or maybe some cereal and some toast, thinking we're being really healthy because it's got no fat and it's whole grain or whatever. In fact, all that is just carbohydrates. So what we're doing is we're just putting papers on a fire, which means it burns really quickly and you're going to have to keep refueling more often. So you'll find that you don't have this long-lasting burn. Now, I can promise you, if you start to switch your breakfast and you add in some really good quality proteins and healthy fats, you'll get the log on the fire effect, which means long, slow, steady burn. You'll feel much more satiated, your hormones will be much more balanced, and your gut will work better too, because this excess is just going to cause issues, especially if you're eating the wrong types of carbohydrates, like I mentioned earlier. So I'll give you a rundown of some good ones. So ideas for breakfast. So for me, if you look at the kind of protein side of things, I'm going to break it down into your proteins, your fats, and your carbohydrates. So protein sources, eggs, amazing. And the great thing with where we live is there are so many local farmers that you can go and get some, freshly laid eggs from. Salmon and spinach. So you could have egg, salmon, and spinach. Now, of course, I know many of you might be thinking, oh, but I want a bit of toast with that. And I get it, like just having that bit of toast to dip in your egg, whatever, can be wonderful. But unfortunately, if it's just loaded with gluten, and I'm not saying, never eat bread again, but what I'm saying is be mindful of how often you are eating these types of foods. Because if you're eating gluten for breakfast, gluten for lunch, gluten for dinner, so let's say cereal and toast for breakfast, a sandwich for your lunch, and pasta for dinner, then you're just having gluten, gluten, and gluten. Then you might have a couple of snacks, which will be some biscuits and something else. And it's just like gluten. And like I mentioned earlier, that can really have an impact on your gut lining. It can pull the cells apart and allow undigested proteins to escape through. So if you can find better alternatives, always great. Now, I'm not a great fan of gluten-free breads because they're often really expensive, which is not great for you. And they're often loaded with just loads of refined rubbish. So not great. So if you're not quite ready to completely ditch your bread, then you can actually make bread really simply without having to prove it and all of that side of things from chickpea flour and buckwheat flour, which is a gluten-free alternative. I make a great one. It's really simple to make. If you still, like, I just need the normal bread, then the best option would be to go for a good quality sourdough. Now, what I like to do is I get a sweet potato and I slice it thinly, and I just pop it in the microwave for a really short period of time, just to kind of soften it a little bit. Then I put it under the grill and I toast it like toast. And then I put my eggs on that. So it's kind of like my alternative to your normal toast. Try it and see how you find it. It's a winner. It's a winner. So the second option I like to recommend are things like smoothies. So smoothies, when I say smoothie, please don't just go and get fruit and stick it in a blender and go, there we go. Because again, I'm not saying that fruit is bad at all. Like, fruit's got some amazing antioxidants in, but you want the balance of the proteins with the healthy fats as well as those carbohydrates. So, sorry, this is my ideas for breakfast, not my ideas for proteins. So ideas for breakfast. So yeah, smoothies, not just made from fruit, balance it out with your proteins and healthy fats. So my idea of a great smoothie would be add in some high quality plant-based protein powder, and again, check the ingredients. So you don't want one loaded with artificial sweeteners and things like that. So look for a good quality plant-based protein powder. You can add in some berries for your antioxidants and a bit of carbohydrates, maybe some banana. You can add in some avocado, makes it really thick and creamy. You can buy frozen avocado, which is amazing. And again, it makes it, like I said, really thick and creamy. Or you can add in some nut butter, and you can make some really simple, wonderful, tasty delights. They literally taste like ice cream. Like, for me, they satisfy every single kind of craving that I have. And also another great thing about a smoothie is it's a great way of getting readily absorbable nutrients into the body, because it's already food that's broken down, which means your gut doesn't have to work as hard to break it down. Another great option, an omelette. Good old omelette cooked in some coconut oil with some spinach and some tomatoes. Fabulous. You could have some gluten-free oats, and again, stick some protein powder in there and some healthy fats on the top, like some nut butter or some chopped up nuts and seeds or coconut flakes. And that will just balance it out a little bit better. So rather than just having oats and nothing else, add some protein in there and add some good fats. Now, what I also really love to do with my oats, and this sounds weird, but trust me, it's a good one. Grate some courgette, so really finely grate courgette, not a huge amount, maybe like half a courgette, and stick it in your oats. And it just bulks it out, and you're getting a little bit of fibre in there as well. You're getting a bit of veg. And you're going to feel fuller for longer because you've got more in there. Or you can do the same with cauliflower rice. I do that too. So you've got your oats, and another great option is some coconut yogurt. You can get some great coconut yogurts nowadays. Or if you are okay with dairy, some organic natural yogurt. And again, put some berries in there. You could add some gluten-free oats in, stir them all together. You could even leave it overnight and make them all thick, and then add some almond butter on the top. I often like to put a bit of protein powder in there again, just to add some decent protein in there, because what I find is a lot of people undereat on protein. So some other of my absolute favorites, protein pancakes, oat crepes that I make from eggs and oats, and I blend it all together and they taste incredible. Overnight oats, like I just mentioned, there's some great ideas there. So you don't just have to go for your standard bowl of cereal or piece of toast. If you need any help with recipes, then please feel free to reach out to me. So the second thing to consider to support your health and your gut is think about the color of your plate. Is it mainly beige? So like I spoke about a second ago with breakfast and with, this excess of gluten, if you look at a lot of people's plates, they're beige. So you have cereal for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for dinner. The majority of the plate, or loads of rice, is beige. And is there a lot of packet foods in there as well? Now, I'm not saying don't ever eat anything from a packet, because I understand that we live in a fast-paced world nowadays and we need some convenience here and there. So I like to say 80% of your food, make it come from real whole foods, the real stuff. And again, I'm going to give you some examples of those real whole foods in 1 second. And then the 20% can be the convenience, the fun stuff. So that's what a plate really should be all about. And for me, when I kind of teach people about how to eat, have half of your plate as your veg, loads of color, loads of greens, loads of reds, blues, all your veg, like all the different veg, one side. Then make a quarter your good proteins. And then a quarter should be your carbohydrates and your fats mixed together. So if you're just eating loads of refined carbohydrates, and I would say like the carbohydrate portion is probably like your side dish, that little quarter bit with the fats in there. Now, if you're just eating loads of refined carbohydrates, and again, for a lot of people, the majority of their plate is the carbohydrate portion, so breads, crackers, crisps, rice, all of that. And I'm not saying rice is highly refined unless it's white rice, but it's still the same thing. It will cause this response in your blood sugar if you don't couple it properly. So you need to balance it out with better choices of carbohydrates, and then couple it with healthy proteins and fats, so you don't get this massive rise and crash the other side. So whenever this happens, you're basically going to crave more of the quick fixes, because carbohydrates are broken down to sugar in your body. No matter what source the carbohydrate is, it will be broken down and become sugar in your body, which is fuel. That's how your body survives, is it needs fuel. Now, the rate at which that's done depends on the type of carbohydrate and what you couple it with. So if you couple carbohydrates with good proteins and good fats, it slows down that rise in blood sugar. But also, if you use better quality carbohydrates that don't cause such a spike, you're doing yourself a favor. So I'm not saying that sugar is the devil, because our bodies are fueled on it essentially. And like I said, everything that's a carbohydrate turns to sugar in the body, but it's about the balance and choosing better quality carbs. So here are my food suggestions. So get your pens at the ready. So for good quality proteins, like I mentioned, eggs, fabulous, local eggs, get them, eat them. Organic meats. So again, you can get companies that deliver meat and veg boxes, and what they will do is they will go to local farms. So you're supporting local farming too, which is amazing. They'll go to local farms and they'll get your delivery of what you want delivered to you. So Riverford is an amazing one. Abel and Cole is another one, and they'll pick local farms to get your goods from. So organic meats, fish, you could use plant-based protein powders, beans and lentils could be a protein source, or tempeh and tofu if you are plant-based. Healthy fats. So coconut oil is an amazing healthy fat. Avocados are a brilliant healthy fat. Nuts and seeds. Dark chocolate, like 100% dark chocolate, is an amazing healthy fat. I actually make my own chocolates from real cacao powder, coconut butter, and cacao butter, and it's amazing. And I put some stevia drops in there to sweeten it. It's amazing. It tastes like the real deal, but it's loaded with antioxidants. Coconut butter, olive oil, great sources of healthy fats. Now, there's one thing that I would recommend, and if there's one thing that you take from everything I said today, please make it be this one. So avoid vegetable oils. So they're marketed at us as being healthy, but they really aren't. And like I said, if there was one piece of advice that I would suggest you taking from this, it's this one. We've been convinced that vegetable oils are safe to use as a heart-healthy alternative over traditional saturated fats. So the very idea that vegetable oils are better than saturated fats comes from the belief that they lower total LDL cholesterol, so they presumably reduce our overall risk of heart disease. Now, I could talk about this subject for days, and if you want to speak to me more about this, please do reach out to me. But vegetable oils include corn, soybean, sunflower, canola, safflower oils, and they're all rich in what is called omega-6, which is an inflammatory polyunsaturated fat. So omega-6 fats not only fuel your body's inflammatory pathways, we need a certain amount of omega-6, but not too much. And the problem with the way we live nowadays, most people have far too much omega-6, which is inflammatory, and not enough omega-3 fats, which is anti-inflammatory. So omega-6 fats not only fuel your body's inflammatory pathways, but they also reduce availability of anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats in your tissues, resulting in more inflammation. So like I mentioned earlier, inflammation is the basis of all disease. So swap your vegetable oils for the oils I've mentioned: coconut oil, avocado oil, good quality olive oil, and even things like real butter. Go back to the real stuff, like have the real butter, not the fake processed margarine you see so heavily promoted on the supermarket shelves, which is really not good for us. So there's your oil, your fats. And now for your carbohydrates. So I'd recommend things like root vegetables, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, parsnips, swede, pumpkin, carrots. They're amazing, amazing sources of carbohydrates because they've got loads of vitamins in there too. Again, they're naturally gluten-free, they're whole foods. Brown rice, quinoa, gluten-free oats, and fruits. Fruits and vegetables are great sources of carbohydrates. So that's kind of like your basis of the food you should be eating on a daily basis, the 80-20 rule, like I mentioned. So 80% coming from these foods that I've just mentioned, 20% can be the fun stuff, but just make sure the 20% doesn't start to become the 80%. And remember, your plate, half of it, your veggies, all your good veggies, greens, purples, leaves galore. Quarter is your proteins, and a quarter is your healthy fats like your coconut oils and your olive oils, and your carbohydrates like your root veggies, your sweet potatoes, and your parsnips, and maybe a bit of brown rice or some quinoa or some gluten-free oats. So the third top tip is to chew your food. So simple, but so overlooked. So digestion starts in your mouth. We produce digestive enzymes in our body. Digestive enzymes help us break down our food into the smallest little particles so it can be absorbed into our body and make up our cells. So they help us break down our food and assimilate that food into our bodies. We need them, and we produce them in our own bodies. So digestion starts in our mouth. When we start to chew, we actually start to produce digestive enzymes. And in fact, actually, it starts before we start to chew. When we look at food, when we sit and we look at food, we start to produce digestive enzymes. And the problem with society nowadays is we're constantly on the go. So we never really sit down properly to eat. We're on the go, rushing from here to there, which means we're not getting that response in our mouths to begin with to start the digestive process. So if you're not chewing your food, it's going down in big chunks, and that undigested food sitting in your gut is really not going to help your gut bacteria because it can ferment, which is not ideal, and it can cause issues with that gut lining. So just start by chewing. Chew your food properly. Number 5 is eat enough naturally fiber-rich foods to feed your good gut bacteria. So like I mentioned earlier, diets that lack this beneficial fiber means your gut bacteria are not getting fed as they should because they feed on fibers. So you really want good fiber in your diet to feed that gut bacteria. You could also supplement with digestive enzymes, prebiotics and probiotics. So probiotics are those good bacteria in the gut. You could supplement with them. And if you've had medication and things, I would definitely recommend supplementing. Prebiotics are the food for your good bacteria. They're like the fiber and all those things that feed the bacteria. So it's a bit like if you have a garden, if you don't water the flowers and feed them, they die. So with your probiotics, those gut bacteria, those beautiful flowers, exactly the same thing. They need the prebiotics to repopulate and to thrive. And then your digestive enzymes are the ones that I said you produce in different parts of your body, starting in the mouth, to help you break down your food. Now you can supplement with all 3 of those things, and actually as we age we start to produce less digestive enzymes in our own body, so it's a good idea to start supplementing as you do start to age. But please be mindful as well of quality. When you're looking at supplementation, the quality is absolutely vital. So don't just rush to the shop and get the cheapest thing you can find. You need to really look into them. So finally, tip number 6 is to do a bit of a reset. I think it's good for all of us every now and then to do so because it's so easy for habits to just slip. So remove the common culprits for a while and see how you feel. Because sometimes you don't know how good you can feel until you feel really good. So you might notice that your cravings diminish, your skin improves, your cognition, if I could even say it, your cognition improves, and your moods improve. So the common culprits that I'd recommend just, removing for a short period of time, and this is not forever, are gluten and gluten containing grains and products, dairy. If you take, whey-based protein powders, I'd remove those for a while because they're a dairy source. Any artificial sweeteners and highly refined processed foods, like lots of packaged stuff. So that's kind of really going to help your gut just go, okay, let's just get back into balance. And then what you can do when you've removed them for a short period, like I normally say to people, about 30 days or so, introduce one at a time and see how your body responds over a 3 to 4 day window. You might add gluten back in and then your body's like, you start to feel things go out of whack. And that's a sign that your body's not dealing with it very well. So it's probably an idea for you to limit that food, not consume it in excess. So really interesting fact here as well. Did you know you often crave foods that you're intolerant to? And the reason being, it causes this rapid rise in your blood sugar, which is a bit like a natural high. So it feels great at the time, but it doesn't feel good afterwards, a bit like a hangover. So, when we have this rapid rise in blood sugar, it's like that high that our bodies want. It's like a bit like when you see children eating sugar, they're like, wow, bouncing off the walls. That's what basically happens. So when we get this rapid rise in blood sugar from that food that we might be intolerant to, then what happens is we get a massive blood sugar dip the other side, because our bodies are so clever and know that huge spikes in our blood sugar is not good for the body. It's very damaging. So it causes all these hormonal responses to remove that sugar from the bloodstream, but it often ends up in a crash in blood sugar. And when it crashes, you crave that natural high again, because it's like the pep. So you go scavenging for that same food. So it could be that removing that food, that bread or that gluten or whatever it is that your body's not dealing with very well, will make a difference to your cravings. Try it and see. So that's all of my tips for you. I really hope that's helped you all. If you need any help or recipe suggestions, then please feel free to get in touch. And I really look forward to seeing you become the healthiest you who feels good. So enjoy the rest of this amazing event, everyone, and take care.